Okay, guys, so welcome back to AuddyHotties. Today we are talking about what else is under the neurodiversity umbrella. So, yeah.
Lots of things.
Lots of things, more than I realized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go.
Hotties.
Yeah, welcome to the AuddyHottie podcast.
Here we are.
All right, guys, welcome back to AuddyHotties. I'm Bree,
I'm McKenna.
and we're here today to talk about what else is underneath the umbrella of neurodiversity. So,
What is there?
I know, right? So I wanted to go through this one because I feel like it's important that we just have an understanding of what else is in the similar category so that we can be really good advocates for other people and make sure not to be like too exclusive. Like obviously on this podcast, we only have experience with our autism and ADHD.
Well, maybe it'll even make us have more language around like people with ADHD rather than
Mhm.
like neurodiverse people. Now that we
Yeah.
have a little bit more context.
Yeah, because it's both
I don't know.
inclusive and more exclusive too, of
Interesting.
like
Yeah.
maybe our ADHD things don't carry over to all experiences under neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind
That
of
makes sense.
changing our thinking just a little bit on that.
So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see where this episode takes us. And I heard that it's a two-part episode.
It's gonna be our first two-part episode because there's so many of them, and I really wanted to make sure to do justice to them.
Yeah.
I didn't use too much of a structure, but like I kind of go through the same things on each one. So I was trying to kind of give a brief overview of what it is, some symptoms or causes, and then I didn't go into any like treatment related things, but some of a few of them had these cool pages on the sites, I would say like strengths that these people may also have. And so I thought that was kind of cool too. So we'll go into some of those and then just some facts that I found along the way that I was like, oh, I did not know that. So yeah.
I'm excited to hear.
Cool.
And like,
Um,
I'm excited to learn if what I think is
uh,
neurodiverse is like what you talk about, or if it's completely different.
yeah. There's gonna be a lot of me like reading information and not so much of like you can definitely jump in whenever you have anything to say, but you might not have a lot to say about it either. So
Okay.
So I'm not going to list them all up front because I kind of want them to be like one at a time as a, like oh okay that's next kind
Sounds
of thing.
good. Yeah.
And then a lot of the information that I got was sourced from the Cleveland Clinic site because they're a pretty reputable source. But then pretty much everything else I got is either directly from that diagnosis's like foundation that talks a lot about it or other medical sites that are well known like the Mayo Clinic, um, NIH, those kind of areas that are like pretty well known, not just, straight from the AI source or
RFK
Reddit or
Jr.
something. Oh, yes, RFK Jr.'s list of things that are not conditions
Come
because he
on,
doesn't know
he's in
anything about
charge of
anything.
all of that, isn't he?
Yep.
I think. Okay,
He's
I'm
also
not.
in charge of all
I'm not
the
gonna go there.
infected Greeks and how that's not a problem.
Ah!
We still haven't scheduled a politics episode, so we'll see about that.
Clearly, we need to.
McKenna's settling in, so she's ready to listen. This is gonna
Yeah,
be
I was
a lot
also
of me
told.
reading.
I was told that I might not be talking much on the pod, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I'll listen.
Okay. Don't go to sleep though.
Well, no promises.
Okay, cool. So for part one. Oh wait, before part one, I wanted to check in on the update of how your nose is healing.
Oh yes, it is healing fine. I'm not salt watering it as much as I should, so I think it's healing a little bit slower than it should be. But all in all, I'm starting to wear like the so it
The
has a
closure ball.
ball on the
Yeah.
end, and so the first few days I really didn't want the ball to show. I was
Mhm.
like really self-conscious about it. So I kept it up in my nostril, and then like over the week it like came down and then it got in the center and I was like, that's a cool look. So
I like it.
but the funny thing is like kind of like my haircut last year, that
Mm.
huge change. Um, People have been treating me so weird. Like so weird. And I'm just like, whatever, dude. I feel like 10% hotter. So that's all that
Yes.
matters.
Love it.
But yeah, it's been funny. I'm so glad I did it too. And my sister's like, I feel like people aren't saying anything because it just looks like you've had it forever. Like
Yeah,
it's just in your face and you've like had it forever. I'm
natural.
like, all right, well.
I triggered a verbal stim a minute ago and I didn't say it, so now I have to say it. I said I like it, and then that made me think of I like it, Picasso.
Where's that
It's from
from?
TikTok. It would always be like something goofy, like a really goofy looking dog or something, and they'd be like, I like it, Picasso.
I heard that.
Okay, anyways.
It's funny. Oh, I love the stems.
Yeah. All right, so shall we dive in?
How's your week been?
Oh, how's my
I
week?
don't know. How's
I've
your
been sick
septum
for like
doing?
5 days.
Yeah, so how is your septum doing after being sick?
Shockingly, I really thought that my septum would get in the way of like blowing my nose and stuff, but it
Yeah,
really doesn't. Like,
good.
besides having to clean it.
Yeah,
Gross. But yeah, I don't even notice it anymore when I like go to blow and stuff. So
good.
have you accidentally bumped it at all? Like made your eyes water so bad?
Yes, I've
Oh,
kept Frankie like an arm's length
oh
at
yeah.
all
So
times
she
because
doesn't headbutt
I
it.
know her. I know her so well. Um, I turned over one night onto my pillow and like flattened it. That was really hard. Ran into my shower wall, which
Oh,
has like never happened. That hurt really bad in my nose.
oh my gosh.
And then one of my stems actually is like
Oh
rubbing
yeah,
my
you were talking
nose.
about that last time.
So that's been torturous to not be
Don't stim,
able
don't
to
stim,
do.
don't stim.
So what I've been doing is like itching with like one fingernail, and I feel like that gets the same sensation that I'm seeking, but
Mm.
I didn't know how much I touched my nose before.
I
So
had
that's
that
weird.
sensation when I got my traguses that I was
Really?
like, this is not a part of my body I ever touch. And then like I would
Yeah.
constantly be like noticing that I was brushing my hair back or like whatever. And I'd be like, what the hell? Who
What's
touches this
happening?
part of their Oh, buddy.
So weird. But yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad you feel hotter. That's
Oh
great.
yeah. We love it. We love the glow ups.
Heck yeah. All right, let's dive into this lovely episode, part one. So first of all, I wanted to do what's the definition of neurodivergence so we get a good idea of where we're starting with. Um, and again, to clarify, we've said this a billion times, but I am not an expert on any of these conditions. I'm
Me
literally
neither.
giving you a baseline of knowledge because we should be well-informed humans.
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
So neurodivergence is when someone's brain processes, learns, and or behaves differently from what is considered typical.
Okay.
So real broad overview. Um, and then there was something that said that not all neurodiversity is a disability, but all neurodiversity is a difference in how the brain works.
Love that.
Yeah. Neurodiversity, the word was originally coined by a woman named Judy Singer, who is also autistic in 1997.
Yep.
Super cool. I will probably be including her in a future episode that I want to do that's on like early autism pioneers. That's I would call that pioneering if you literally coined the term
Right?
neurodiversity.
In the 90s.
I was already
Jeez
5 years
Louise.
old. Crazy.
That's so wild.
Yeah. So then things that we're going to go into today is who else is neurodiverse? There are a lot of different things that are considered neurotypes also, so we'll be kind of talking about everything all together. And interestingly, among all the different neurodiversities, um, the most common co-occurring thing with each of them was ADHD.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so ADHD and a lot of other things go hand in hand, which is good to know. So some statistics on that where a person may experience symptoms of other neurodevelopmental conditions such as autism, Asperger's, Tourette's, OCD, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. Approximately 1 in 2 people with ADHD have dyslexia. Crazy. 1 in 2 people with ADHD have dyspraxia. 9 in 10 people with Tourette's have ADHD. Because almost all people with Tourette's have ADHD. And then 2 in 3 people with ADHD have autism spectrum traits. And they are 8-fold more likely to meet full criteria for an autism spectrum diagnosis. Numbers are even higher than I thought.
That is a lot higher.
Yeah.
I guess, okay. So what you're saying is there's more comorbidities, but there's not like more people in the world with ADHD more than anything else.
That's a great question because I didn't do the percent of the population that has ADHD. Let's find out real quick. So in children, 3 to 17, about 11.4% of children have ADHD and 8.7% of adults.
Okay.
So that's kind of a good starting point because that is a statistic I gave on each of the areas was what percent of the population, which sometimes it was really hard to find because they kept wanting to say stupid stuff like 1 in 250,000 or
Yeah.
like
You're like, I don't know.
yeah,
Don't
some
know
like
how to
weird
do
other numbers
math.
that I was like, what? This is
Yeah.
not helping me. Give me the percent.
Yeah.
That's a good baseline of that's about how many people have ADHD. Another thing I wanted to cover that's in general for most of the conditions is that the naming all comes from kind of the same place, which is cool. So Latin is the base for a lot of naming of medical conditions. And the dys, prefix in Latin, is Latin for badly. So most of them are like badly does something. So for example, the first one we're going to go through is dyslexia. So that's literally badly, lexia, reading, basically. That's what lexia means. So you've got badly reading.
I don't love that at all.
No.
I think that is horrible.
Yeah. But most people don't know that because we don't know Latin.
Okay. Well, now I'm gonna call dyslexia something else. I don't know what yet.
So yeah, so we're starting with dyslexia.
Okay.
So we have talked about before that this is a common other neurodiversity when we talked about famous people
Yes.
and how many other famous people there are with dyslexia.
Yeah.
So dyslexia occurs in 5 to 20% of the population.
Hmm.
Pretty broad range. I think it's because
It's a
they're
huge range. I
underdiagnosed.
think so too.
Yeah, most people may have like minor symptoms without realizing it
Hmm.
or just not report it, that kind of thing. So dyslexia's definition is a form of neurodivergence that involves speaking, reading, and writing. It's typically associated with misreading, writing, or speaking words or letters out of order, but it encompasses a lot more than that. For example, it can include confusion with certain letters, difficulty organizing words into sentences, trouble acquiring a vocabulary or pronouncing words, and or challenges following directions. Which I thought that was interesting. I didn't really realize like how it would make following a direction much more difficult. There's a couple different ways that they categorize dyslexia, but and you can correct me if this is something that's in your wheelhouse.
I do have stuff to say, but I'm gonna wait.
Okay.
I'm not gonna
So
correct
I
you.
ran into two different categorizations. One of them was categorizing subtypes of auditory, visual, and attentional. And then another one was subcategories that were a little more specific. Um, so there's developmental dyslexias, and there's one, two, three, four, five, six of those. So we've got phonological, which is difficulty sounding out words and connecting the letter to their sound. Surface, which is difficulty recognizing whole words and struggling with irregular words or words that don't sound like they're spelled. That's surface. Double deficit, which is a combination of the two above. Oh no, it's a combination of phonological, which was that first one, and then rapid naming difficulties, which is the next one, and that's difficulty rapidly naming objects or letters. I love a very clear definition.
Yeah.
We called it rapid naming difficulties because it's difficulty with rapidly naming things. Love that. Deep dyslexia, which is a more severe form of phonological dyslexia with semantic errors and misreading of words. Maybe you can tell us what is semantic errors. Do you know? On the spot.
Well, semantics is a part of language, and it is, I think that the meaning that words carry.
Mm.
So what was the question again?
So they may have difficulty with semantic errors. So it'd be
Yeah,
like
like
misreading the.
not understanding what words mean. I literally think I have dyslexia after hearing some of those things.
Here we are self-diagnosing ourselves. We're on the first one here because already having a crisis.
I don't think it's a crisis.
No.
It's more just like, huh, I do that. Huh, I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. So I imagine that it would be like either not whatever it is, not remembering a word or like being able to recall the word.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna interrupt you one more time
Yeah.
because my supervisor at work, I told them about the podcast,
Uh-huh.
so they are now a listener. And so now I have to be like on my shit. Like actually saying things that I know. I
Okay.
promise I'm a good SLP, Jill. Anyway.
Okay. So that was deep dyslexia. So that's more severe form with semantic errors and misreading of words.
Hmm.
And then the last one in that category is visual dyslexia, which is difficulty with the visual aspects of reading, like tracking across the page
Yeah.
and recognizing letter forms.
Hmm.
And then there's acquired dyslexia, which can develop after something like a brain injury or an illness.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think some of the dyslexia traits that you were describing, I have also learned as aphasia, which
Mm,
is something that happens when you have a brain injury, like a stroke, and it's in a certain part of the brain where you do have like a hard time recalling words or a hard time assigning words to objects. So
mm,
some of those similar traits. But what I was gonna say about dyslexia is, and I wonder about a lot of things, but mostly dyslexia is, you know how I've talked about Gestalt language processing, how it's
mhm,
just a different way of learning things. So I actually like think that that's the same way with dyslexia,
mm,
that dyslexic people, like people that have dyslexia, we just don't know how to, we don't know enough about how they are processing information. And so like kind of like autism too, and really I think everything, but it's like, you know, what we do for intervention is just repeating and using visuals and figuring out different ways to do it. But I think that there just needs to be like more research on what it actually is, and that it's just a different way of acquiring language.
mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Yeah, and
there's no
we only
research to back that up,
right, we only
but
teach in, one or two ways. We don't really
we
teach
do.
in these many varied ways. So,
Yeah. So
yeah. And then this also brought up that auditory processing disorder can also be related to dyslexia. And I definitely have some auditory
I
processing
have
disorder. Yeah,
I have
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Oh, this is so interesting. No
Yeah.
more diagnoses this year, Bree.
The other thing about it is that dyslexia can also impair spoken language, which isn't something that I ever realized. I think I only pictured it being when someone's trying to write specifically. Mm,
Yeah, it makes sense. Because expressive language is through spoken or written.
mhm,
So, and then receptive would be reading or hearing. So it makes sense that they're different modalities of that communication, but it would be the same process of either taking in or giving out information.
mhm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So some cool strengths that came from that one is that people who are dyslexic can be exceedingly creative and innovative. So they often approach problems from more unconventional angles.
Hmm.
And then strong reasoning skills. They can analyze information, identify patterns, and connect different concepts really well. Excellent problem solving. And then a lot of people also have really strong visual spatial reasoning. So like they can excel at understanding spatial relationships and then manipulating objects in their mind, which
That's
is
really
really,
cool.
really cool. Yeah. Which I can imagine. I mean, if you're basically doing that with the words to try to
Hmm.
make them make sense, like you have that strength of other skills too. Um, and then vivid imagination too. They can often visualize complex scenarios and create detailed mental images. Pretty cool.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah. All right, so that was our first one. Now we're moving on to a somewhat related thing, dyspraxia. So this one is literally badly dyspraxia, moving, dyspraxia. This one is in
Okay.
5 to 6% of the population, so a little
Yeah.
lower. And then 2% are in the severe category.
Hmm.
It's also called developmental coordination disorder or DCD, which is actually what I've heard of it labeled as more often, but I think that's just coming from the healthcare end of things.
Would this also be a global delay?
It could be a part of a global delay, I
Hmm.
think, but I think that this is a little more like specified into that.
Nuanced,
Like
yeah.
a global delay would be like we could give it to kind of anybody that has a delay.
Hmm.
Whereas this would be more specifically through the features that we're going to talk about. So it affects coordination and fine motor skills especially, and people don't ever outgrow it.
Hmm.
Something that if you have it, you have it. Handwriting is one of the first ways that they catch it.
Hmm.
And then interestingly, so it's so that people with dyspraxia can either struggle with sports or be excellent at them. Which I thought was so interesting because I'm like, I'm pretty sure I have dyspraxic symptoms, like especially when I'm um overstimulated or shut down either one. I get a lot of the like running into walls,
Hmm.
uncoordination, dropping things that I don't mean to.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of those difficulties. And then my handwriting gets horrible.
Yeah.
So bad. Um, and so that's really interesting because I always thought like, oh, well, how can I be, bad at motor coordination when I was a figure skater and a dancer and I can do like pretty much any sport that you put me into and I'm like just excel at it. Like
Because it's not about being bad at something. That's
uh-huh.
why. No, but I hear what you're saying, where it's like, how can I be so coordinated at one thing in this part of my
Mhm.
life, and then so like not coordinated or having a really hard time with gravity in this
Yeah.
other like state of being. So I totally
Yeah.
get what you're saying.
So interesting.
It is.
Particularly in children, it does result in delays in things like sitting and walking, jumping, smaller tasks like tying shoelaces,
Hmm.
and they may even have a speech delay also.
Hmm.
And then it can also result in anxiety and difficulty with like building and drawing things, persistent drooling, which is
Hmm.
interesting, but that's also a motor control thing.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah, I had a couple of kids during my externship that their whole diagnosis was global delay. That's why I asked.
mm,
But now that I'm looking back, I do feel like we talked about how they had dyspraxia, and we were trying to just we were just trying to figure out like a communication system for them because
mm,
like it's a really interesting case where it felt like observing this kid and they just didn't know what to even do to coordinate or
mm,
like because I don't think that the intent was lacking. It was almost like I remember looking into his eyes and just feeling like he was communicating that way.
mm,
But like had very little movement overall and then did not speak the whole time I was there, and we used AAC and he didn't like point to anything yet. He was only like 2.5, so like just starting his journey, but I just thought it was really interesting. I have never worked
mm.
with a kid like that before.
Yeah.
So,
So types of dyspraxia, there's motor dyspraxia, which is general, ideational dyspraxia, which it sounds like maybe that was where it's like the planning of motor
mhm.
movements, orofacial dyspraxia, so that's mouth and face, or verbal, it's called both. Constructional dyspraxia. Not really sure what that one is. I'm thinking it's maybe about like the like how you form things in your mind. Anyways, limb dyspraxia, gait dyspraxia, so how we're walking, and gaze dyspraxia, which is interesting. I wouldn't have thought of just the eyes being able to be affected by that.
Mhm. Yeah, if it's coordination, I feel like it could affect so many different things in so many different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess in the speech world, we talk about apraxia,
Mm-hmm.
and I get that confused with dyspraxia. And
Dyspraxia.
I learned that the dyspraxia is more of like the fine motor, full body movement. But now that I'm thinking about it, it does feel very similar to what we think of apraxia, which is that coordination aspect of speech that is not functioning correctly.
Hmm.
So,
Let's do a real quick Google here.
apraxia versus
Yeah.
dyspraxia. So I know in Latin means not, so then that would be
Oh.
not coordinating. So it would be badly coordinating or not coordinating, which I feel like the not coordinating
You're onto
is
something.
gentler.
You're onto something.
So it's also like a very nuanced topic in the SLP community,
Mm.
and it's like not a lot of people will even see students with apraxia, childhood apraxia of speech.
Okay, so this one
It's
says that
fascinating.
dyspraxia may have different definitions based on what field you're in, such as physiotherapy, speech and language therapy teachers, and so on. However, according to the Dyspraxia Foundation, it can be defined as an impairment or immaturity of the organization of movement. In other words, it's about the brain's immaturity in processing information, which affects the body's responses. Apraxia, according to this one, is used to define the impaired ability of performing a gesture despite several brain functions being engaged in the action, which means that people can have difficulties in performing certain movements even though their muscles are normal.
So, and that makes more sense to me with the apraxia that we see because it's like the language departments are working, like your
Mm,
expressive and receptive language, your speech muscles and your speech articulators, like there's nothing different going on in your mouth. And it's like that literal connection from your, like that motor planning to your mouth that is somehow getting interrupted.
okay.
And also that can also be a part of aphasia, which I was talking about earlier too.
Mm, okay. I
So,
like that. I think that definition makes more sense than the other one.
yeah.
Cool. So some possible
What are words?
difficulties.
It doesn't, it literally doesn't
So,
matter, but
I
that's just
mean,
interesting
we
to
literally
me.
have to take classes in medical terminology to be able to like interpret stuff, and it's
Yeah.
still hella hard. So some possible difficulties that people can have related to dyspraxia would be organizing ideas clearly and structuring written work, producing work legibly and quickly by hand, working with tools and machinery, difficulties with lab work or practical tasks, particularly if they require accuracy and precision, poor time management and self-organization, and getting lost traveling to new locations or difficulty reading maps. So that was interesting. And then possible
That's
strengths for
weird.
them would be creativity, strategic thinking, problem solving again, an eye for detail, which is kind of cool, and good long-term memory. Yeah. All right, that was number
Wow.
two. So our next one
I
is
feel like,
another.
oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
for it, go.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's interesting because I feel like there was a lot of crossover between dyspraxia and dyslexia, and also what I already know about autism and ADHD.
Uh-huh.
So
She's on to something. No,
my
that's
brain
that's
is turning.
that's super true among it, and like I think that's where like it helps tie in why all of these things are neurodiversities because
Yeah.
there's some change in the way that our brains work, and there's a lot of overlap between things.
So cool.
Super cool.
Love it.
So our next one is another dys one. So we've got dyscalculia. So calculia, math, numbers.
Yeah.
So we're doing badly numbers. This
It's
one is actually,
horrible
I know, right?
every time.
So this one was actually way higher.
Yeah.
25% of math learning difficulties relate from dyscalculia, and 6% of those are then diagnosed with dyscalculia. So they think there's a lot more difficulties than are diagnosed.
Want to know why?
Hmm.
Because there is no way to diagnose adults with dyscalculia.
Oh.
Dyscalculia.
Hmm.
My cousin just told me that, and she has dyscalculia,
Oh.
but was not like properly diagnosed because there was like no tests for her to take over age
Wow.
18, even though it's something that she's had forever, and they just decided not to get her tested as a kid.
Hmm.
But isn't that weird?
That's
And
crazy.
it could just be like who she was working with, but
Yeah.
I think that's really weird.
Just to be told no kind of sucks because you still struggle with it even if you are over 18.
Exactly. She's like, I'm not lying.
It's probably another one that you don't outgrow. Like,
Yeah.
mm,
And probably another just different way of interpreting language or not interpreting
visual, yeah, visual
numbers.
organization of numbers. Yep. So there are a lot of key features to this one. Um, it is considered a specific or a distinct learning disability. It primarily impacts math skills. They may struggle with understanding the relationship between numbers and quantities, such as connecting the number to two objects. Difficulty with counting both forwards and backwards, and memorizing basic math facts like multiplication tables. It can also impact spatial reasoning, so direction, spatial organization, and time-related tasks like telling time or estimating time, which I didn't even think of that either. Like this is expanding my brain so much because I had the very like stereotypical picture of a lot of these conditions in my head.
Hmm.
So especially like this, like I just pictured like, oh, numbers flip around or have a hard time with numbers specifically, but then you don't think about like that as a clock. That is
Yeah.
all these other things.
Well, because time is such a weird thing to work with.
Hmm.
Um, just there's a lot of different components to it. It's a very nuanced system. But I'm even thinking now of like, gosh, we work with 18 to 22-year-olds and like that some of them still like cannot do certain things with time. And it's like, at what point? Like how what is supportive to people that have dyscalculia? Because like
Yeah.
it is not something you outgrow.
That's
Feels
a great
like
question. That's part I just
ableism.
went into. Right?
I didn't know I get so fired up this episode, but here I am.
I love it. You've had more to say than you thought you would.
I know. I was getting ready to take a little nap.
And she's sitting back up again.
Present.
Love it. They can also involve motor sequencing that involves numbers. It's like learning to count on your fingers, memorizing sequences, similar things like that. And then performing mental math calculations and estimating quantities can be really challenging. Some areas that I didn't realize that it would impact, kind of like telling time, was also reading the dots on dice. Being able to connect
Hmm.
like five dots is five
Yeah.
as a construct, and what
Yeah.
does five mean?
Sure.
Um, and then sequences, so that would be like even learning like the days of the week
Hmm.
because you've got that sequencing to go first or after. And then comparing quantities too. So being able to say like, what is five of something or seven of something?
Yeah.
Is this more bananas or less bananas? Like
Yeah.
those little comparisons between things.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mhm. Then I have a lot of other information on that one, so we'll move along to the next one, which is dysgraphia.
I don't know anything about this one, but I assume it's bad at doing something.
Yeah, graphia. Any guess what graph might be?
Image. An
Mm.
im a picture.
Kind of a good idea. It's
Dysgraphia. Visual.
so graphia is writing. So it's
Oh,
like
not
images.
close at all.
So dysgraphia is a specific learning disability that affects the ability to write, impacting handwriting, spelling, and overall written expression. It can be in children and adults. Um, and though they may struggle with writing, it does not mean that they're less intelligent or creative.
No.
Some key characteristics are impaired handwriting, which can include difficulty with letter formation, spacing, and legibility. Spacing I thought was really interesting. Spelling problems with difficulty spelling and remembering how to spell words, poor written expression, slower writing speed, avoidance of writing, and it can be rooted in some other difficulties with things like motor skills, memory for letter sequences, and executive functions, which there we are tying back into all these other potential conditions that could result in also having dysgraphia.
Well, and it sounds a lot like dyslexia.
Yeah.
So this is interesting.
Yeah. And then factors contributing to dysgraphia, so people can have variations in brain connections and functions related to writing, difficulty with storing or retrieving written words, which is called orthographic coding. Cool things.
Super cool.
Fine motor skills.
I remember that word from grad school.
Oh, nice. And then family history also. And there's some different types. There's motor, which is the physical act. Spatial, which is difficulty with organizing and aligning on the page, such as spacing the letters correctly. Phonological, which is more of the translating sounds into the letters and words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That
we
sounds
had
familiar.
we had a lot of phonological awareness
Mm,
with writing
okay.
in general. Like we studied that in grad school.
Okay.
I can't tell you much about it.
Lexical dysgraphia, which is difficulty accessing the meaning of the words and translating them into written form,
Mhm.
and dyslexic dysgraphia,
Yeah.
which is a combination of the two where writing and reading are affected.
Mhm.
So our next one is synesthesia.
Oh, this one's cool.
This
Not that the other ones weren't cool, but like this is
one is a
so
really unique,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
thing. It's a rate of 4%, and it stated that it's uncommon but not rare. So 4% isn't enough to put it in the rare category. And it's one of the few conditions that more women have than men. Yeah. So synesthesia is a phenomenon that causes sensory crossovers, such as tasting colors or feeling sounds. And some people describe it as having your wires crossed in their brain because it activates two or more senses when there's only reason for one sense to be active. Synesthesia isn't a disease or a medical condition, but it can be a symptom of certain brain-related conditions.
I think that there is someone on Love on the Spectrum that has
Oh.
that can see. Colors? Nope. Because you can see colors.
I didn't even catch that. Oh my God.
I don't know what
Okay.
you can do. We can move on from that.
Okay. So the types of synesthesia that you can have are auditory tactile synesthesia. So that means that sounds cause you to feel touch-based sensations such as temperature, pressure, or pain.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Day color synesthesia. Some people see or associate certain colors with days of the week. This is one of the more common forms. I didn't
That is so
know.
interesting.
I don't think it's synesthesia, but do you remember how people would always talk about like what color is math and what color is
Yes.
science?
Yes. No, I do. I feel like this has crossed my news feed before of like, this is the color of this day, yada yada.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The next one is grapheme color synesthesia. Grapheme is the word for the smallest part of a written language, like a letter, number, or symbol. Oh, yeah.
I got that right in my brain.
Hey. Some people see different graphemes with specific colors. So people who
Cool.
experience visual synesthesia's projection effect often see graphemes as different colors. So
Cool.
like you're seeing like the letter is a color.
I think it would be like a red, like if you looked at the word red,
Hmm.
R might be orange, E
Oh,
might be blue, D might be green.
oh, okay, cool.
That would be so poetic to just see rainbows all the time and
Yeah.
all that you
I'm so
read.
sorry to the people out there who are colorblind, who are like seeing what colors where.
Oh yeah, that is really sad.
Yeah.
What if you were colorblind and had synesthesia
Oh,
too? Like,
oh,
I don't know. That
can
was
those
just a
cross?
weird thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Huh.
I just sent McKenna a test. Actually, I sent it to all my neurodiverse friends, which the poll so far is 100% of us are, what was the word?
Oh,
Tetrachromat? I think that was it.
something like that. It was a graphic of a spectrum of colors. And it was funny because when I opened up the graphic, I was like, that's weird that they are all different shaped lines, like different color blocks. So
Yeah.
I was like, that's a weird shape. And then after like taking the test, I think that it was divided up into 100 little lines. And
Hmm.
like the closer you got to seeing 100 lines, the more you had this thing where you just saw more colors.
Yeah, it was like if you saw more than 20
Mhm.
colors that you were a tetrachromat. I'll post the link to it because it's kind of fun to test your friends and see what they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like 25 or less, or it was like 10 to 25 was like normal vision of how many colors you can see.
Hmm.
Interestingly for me, I could see almost every single individual line until it got to the red yellow category.
No way.
Yeah, and I have my
That's
whole life said that
cool.
I had trouble with reds because I went to a school where our school colors were crimson and cream, and I could never fucking find clothes that were
That's
the right
so
crimson.
funny. Oh my gosh.
So I don't think I see as many of the red spectrum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was that way with the middle of it. I think it was blue and
Mm,
purples were in the middle, and that looked like just like a big chunk.
chunk,
But
yeah.
then the other things were.
Huh?
Also, do you know what I learned today?
What?
Purple is not an actual color.
What is it technically? Isn't there another name for it?
Yes, but I don't know that name for
Okay.
it. But technically, what we see is the blend of red and blue, but that like in a rainbow, purple is not like a prism, is not a color of the prism of light.
Huh.
Which now that I'm learning more about color and how it works, I don't understand how that could be true because it seems like there's a lot more colors than just the six colors of a rainbow, but
Yeah.
I did hear that today. Anyway, are you looking it up?
You know I can't help myself. This is a symptom of my autism. I cannot leave something till later. I have to do it right
No
then.
stone unturned.
Yep. But no, purple is not a color in the rainbow. The closest color to the purple is violet. That's what I was thinking of.
What's the difference between purple and violet? There's my autism.
Uh, great question for another time. Let's put that away. We're gonna go on a tangent. I still have one more type of synesthesia to go through. That's a lie. I have three more types. So there's hearing motion synesthesia, which some people experience sounds related to seeing things moving. So an example would be a person hearing a whoosh sound when watching something go past them, but they're not actually hearing the sound from that item. Like their brain like adds a sound for them. Interesting. And then there's mirror touch synesthesia. So that's when you see something happen to someone else and you physically feel it too.
Hmm.
It works similarly to the reflexive cringe you might have if you see someone trip and faceplant or belly flop or something like that.
Oh, I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah, and it says, however, the effect is much stronger. Some people can watch another person being touched on the arm or hand and they also feel it. Sound color synesthesia. So you see specific colors when you hear certain sounds. So like you may be listening to music and you can see a color.
I think that's what David has from Love
Mhm.
on the Spectrum.
This has a lot of musicians and artists often describe having this.
John Batiste has it. It's
Oh,
not David, it's John Batiste,
ah,
who is sensational. Oh my gosh, I love him so
oh,
much. So,
okay.
yeah, he has I still can't say the word synesthesia.
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 Yeah.
Yeah, he has a documentary where he talks about it,
Oh,
and it's called American Symphony.
okay.
We will put it in the bio.
The last one is time and space synesthesia, which is where you visualize things in a very specific way. People often see sequences with a specific patterns or forms. An example of this is visualizing a calendar or a string of numbers in a certain way. Some people can mentally map these out in vivid or detailed ways. So I think I kind of have this.
Yeah, I was gonna say like looking at a space and organizing it, or like, you know what I mean?
Maps, literally like
Yeah.
driving maps. If I have seen I have to see the picture of it, like the overview
Mm,
picture. And then I've always held it in my head building my map.
cool.
And so like if I've seen the map of an area, I can picture which roads go what direction. Um, and then like as I explore an area more, it's like the outsides of the maps are blurry. And it's like as I explore that section, it like unblurs, like
That's
almost like a
so
video
cool.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a weird sense of direction. Like I
Yeah.
can't always do it, but a lot of times if we'll be somewhere random, you can ask me like which way is north or like what way are we facing? And I can usually kind of do like a whoop.
Yeah, I also feel like I have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
The mapping thing I experience a little bit differently where I just kind of know where everything is, but I don't
Hmm.
see it in my brain. I just like know.
Mm.
I think that my visualization is something that I actually don't have a lot of. It's
Mm.
really hard for me to visualize things,
Oh,
but
interesting.
I know where to go, and if I've gone to one place one time, I can get there again without like being on my map.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Pattern
weird.
recognition, maybe.
I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. It's something that I've thought a lot about, but
Yeah.
no.
Hmm. I did want to ask you about something in a random update that
Okay.
I've just remembered. Um, so I was listening to something that was talking about kind of the same idea of like being able to picture things in your head.
Hmm.
And like, did you as a child or now like have the ability to like world build in your head and like have, okay, interesting.
Not at all. In fact, like, okay. I guess I would love to talk more about what world building means because what I'm thinking of is like when I read Harry Potter,
Mm,
it was so hard for me to figure out how to build that world in my brain.
mm,
I actually had to stop at like book four because it was getting too complicated.
mm.
Those kinds of like books with other worlds in it, I cannot visualize.
That's a great example because I think that they were talking about getting into
Yeah.
like fantasy related things. But the
Yes.
other part of it that so I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Mine is incredible. Like I
Yeah.
get mad at movies because they've changed my like brain mapping
That's
of
so
of
funny.
what I've read. And so I have extremely vivid, like I can see the buildings, I can see the people, I can like walk through the halls, like
So
I can build
cool.
all that. But then the other part is I've also always been able to like build my own worlds in my
Yeah.
head. I've like visualize like I had this weird dream thing when I was a kid that was probably from watching Survivor or something of like I don't know, being like released on an island and like having to survive and like do all these different things. And it was like not game show format necessarily, but kind of like that. And I had this
Yeah,
whole world built in my head that I used for years to help myself go to sleep.
that is so
Like I would just lay
cool.
down at night and like for like 15 minutes would just like be in this place, walking around, doing different
Oh,
things, taming wild horses.
I think that's called dreamscaping.
Yeah, dreamscaping.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's super, super cool.
Yeah. I also have very vivid dreams.
I
So
do as well.
yeah.
So I relate differently though, because I think that I have a very vivid imagination, but it's like not visual, it's thoughts.
Mm.
I am someone who like will dream about my next day happening. And unfortunately for me, if I'm like anxious about it, it like literally is everything that goes wrong
Uh,
in the dream. So
okay.
it's
Yeah.
just interesting.
Really connected to daily
Yeah.
life.
hmm And like, I don't know if it's things that I've experienced before that I have seen before because I don't really have that like visual connection of like if a book is telling you how to map out this world or like all of these descriptions about it, since I can't really do that on my own, maybe I'm like way better at doing that once I've like seen people in my life and see layouts of
Mm.
things and like that reality. Maybe it's that tactile component that I'm so much better at than the visual.
Is that true? Like if you see the movie of something, like when you saw the movies of Harry Potter,
Yes.
that now you can activate that and like access.
Yes.
Interesting.
It's very interesting.
Brains, man.
They're so cool.
So the end of that one about synesthesia. So some causes that it can be developmental, possibly genetic, because it often runs in families, but they haven't proven it yet.
Mhm.
It can be acquired, and then it can also be drug induced,
That makes
specifically
sense.
with psychedelics, DMT, tryptamine, LSD, peyote, and psilocybins mushrooms. All right, next thing on the list is Tourette syndrome. So this is only 1% rate, so we're going much lower in the rates here. Um, I have an interesting story about me during COVID. So I don't think it's not true Tourette things, but because there are a lot of other tic disorders as well. But during COVID, from stress-related things, I developed a tic that I had never had before.
Oh,
I
interesting.
didn't get sick, so I don't think it was like an illness-induced thing. But I now have a
Oh.
tic that it somehow it feels like it like starts in my inner ear.
Mhm.
And it almost feels like not like a tickle totally, but kind of like a deep tickle. And then it like moves out of my inner ear. And when it gets out to like the outside feeling, I have an involuntary like head movement to the side. And I often make a verbal like kind of like sound. Yeah,
Wow.
it's really funky.
Do you still have it?
hmm Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. But it does every now
Wow.
and then, and I'll just randomly be like, "Huh," and then
Huh.
continue with my day. Yeah.
Interesting.
So no idea what that is.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know a lot about Tourette's. I know that Billie Eilish has it, and then I know that there's this new
hmm
show.
All right, so what is Tourette syndrome? It's a neurologic condition characterized by tics, involuntary movements, or noises. And there are many excellent qualities that are also associated with it. This one lists the strengths first, which is fun, such as having strong verbal skills, tenacity, creativity, empathy, and hyperfocus. And it's different for everyone. So there's a misconception that all people with Tourette syndrome make severe movements or shout obscenities. And that's not necessarily true. Many people have a lot less noticeable tics, such as throat clearing or eye blinking. Um, Tics that involve rude language or gestures are known as coprolalia and copropraxia, and are only experienced by about 10% of people with Tourette's. It also commonly co-occurs with ADHD. Some examples of some tics can be motor tics like arm jerking, bending at the waist, eye blinking, head jerking or twisting. It's the one that I was just demonstrating.
Mhm.
Hopping, jaw movements, and twisted or distorted facial expressions. And then vocal tips can include barking, grunting, shouting, sniffing, or throat clearing. And I'm sure there's lots of others in between. And there's actually no specialized tests for Tourette syndrome. There is a set of criteria. So they usually include multiple motor tics and one or more vocal tics, not necessarily happening at the same time. The tics have lasted for more than 1 year. They started before the age of 18, and they're not caused by a drug or other medical condition.
Hmm.
They can start as early as 4 years old.
Hmm. That was a question that I had, but I guess that answered it of like, what's the difference between like a tick and a stem
Mhm.
or like a tick and echolalia?
Mhm.
But I think that it would be just like more prevalence of that all around.
I wonder too if it's part of like where the impulse kind of comes from.
I wonder,
I wonder.
I wonder if it's dopamine related since it
Yeah.
is so high correlated with ADHD.
So some other tic disorders that are similar include provisional tic disorder, which is motor or vocal tics one or both for less than 1 year. Persistent chronic tic disorder, which is motor or vocal, but not both for more than 1 year. And then Tourette includes motor and vocal for more than
Mm,
1 year.
okay,
So you can have a chronic tic disorder without having Tourette's.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a show of a person who was on TikTok famously.
Mm.
Like a lot of people followed her because she did a lot of tics and um she's hilarious. And I think her name is Bailey or Balin, but now
Mm.
there's a show about her on HBO
Oh, how
or
cool.
Hulu or something.
The next one is OCD, which is a 2 to
Mhm.
3% rate. I'm not going to get deep into OCD though, because we're hoping to have a friend on who has it to talk about OCD versus autism versus control issues and that kind of thing. It is a condition characterized by uncontrollable and recurring thoughts or obsessions and behaviors or compulsions that a person feels driven to repeat. They cause significant distress and can interfere with daily life. So, obsessions is described as intrusive, unwanted thoughts, images, or urges that cause anxiety and distress. And compulsions are repetitive behaviors or mental acts that individuals feel driven to perform to reduce anxiety related to the obsessions. And individuals with OCD experience significant distress and anxiety due to the intrusive thoughts and repetitive behaviors. So that's an important feature is that you have distress and anxiety from it.
Mhm.
So we're going to skip through that one since we're going to cover it later in more depth. And the last one for our part one is sensory processing disorder. So you can have sensory processing disorder and not be diagnosed with autism or ADHD. It can be its own separate thing. And it can occur in 5 to 16% of kids and 1 to 3% of adults, which I don't know about you, but I feel like I find that kind of suspicious.
That is significantly low.
Yeah, I was like, that's a weird amount of difference. And also, what happened to those 5 to 16% of kids?
That's the thing that I just feel like I keep on learning is like there's so much focus on childhood diagnosis and there's such a lack for adult diagnosis and like
Mm,
what is up with that? Like why? It's an interesting thing that I'm working through in my
mhm,
brain.
yeah. So, sensory processing disorder is a difference in the way that your brain understands and responds to information from your senses. This includes what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and it can also affect your movement.
Hmm.
Typically, they identify SPD in children, and it also commonly affects people with neurodevelopmental and neurodivergent conditions like autism spectrum and ADHD, but you can also have it without any other conditions. According to the Cleveland Clinic, it's not currently an official medical diagnosis, but I have seen people diagnosed with just specifically that. So I don't know if that's like in process or colloquially we use it or what's that? I don't know if it's in the
Yeah,
DSM yet. Mm.
I guess I just don't know the separation
Mm.
because I find that a lot of my autistic traits are that sensory processing difference. So,
I think the
like,
difference is the cluster of symptoms. So like if you just had sensory concerns and no social concerns, no like, other what else is involved in an autism diagnosis?
that's what I'm
No
saying
cognition
though.
concerns, no, like, I think autism has to be that broader areas of life are affected, whereas sensory processing is we're just focused on you just have sensory concerns, but you don't
Okay.
have limitations in other areas of your life. Mm.
It's just interesting because I think of sensory experience very similar to those other experiences where it is all like coordination and processing information and it's being done in a different way.
Hmm.
So I guess what you're saying is like it's just that isolated experience of autism that would be this separate disorder.
Yeah,
Okay,
basically. Yeah.
thank
And
you.
then like the other areas like, you know, cognition or social behavior, like yes, that is related to it because there are sensory components to those, but it's not all sensory, like it's, pattern recognition, it's understanding social cues, like things like that that are not just the sensory part.
Hmm.
And then there's a bunch of different types of sensory processing disorder. So the first one is sensory overresponsivity. So in this type, you're overly sensitive to sensory information. You may respond too much, too soon, or for too long to sensory information than most people. Under responsivity, so here you need more sensory information than usual for it to have an impact. So you might be unaware of sensory information or have a delay in responding compared to most people. Sensory craving, in this type, you need and seek out sensory information for stimulation, but getting the stimulation results in disorganization and doesn't satisfy the craving.
Hmm.
Sensory discrimination disorder. This type includes difficulty interpreting subtle qualities of sensory information. For example, auditory discrimination disorder makes it difficult to understand the things that you hear. So I'm sure that can be a component of auditory processing difficulties. And then postural disorder. With this type, you have issues perceiving your body's position in space. You may have difficulty stabilizing your body during movement or at rest without core stability.
Proprioception.
Perception. Some symptoms of this can be constantly bumping into things, feeling discomfort in certain types of clothing and fabric. That's me. Gagging when eating certain food textures,
That's me.
needing to constantly touch things. I feel like that's
Kinda,
kind of
sort
me.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not recognizing personal space, reacting to sudden movements, touches, loud noises, and or bright lights,
that's me.
and trouble using fine motor skills. And interestingly, they found that studies identified that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are not functioning correctly in them,
Yeah,
which makes sense if your like fight or flight system isn't really flighting to the right things and fighting to the right things, then
totally. I do notice that my sensory experience elevates
mm,
when I am like in fight or flight. So I totally think that it's all related nervous system wise. And it
yeah.
makes sense too, since like that's the main communicator of your body.
Yeah, I definitely have the more hypersensitive type because small stimuli can push me into anxiety or
Yeah.
stress pretty quickly.
I actually have a really cool visual that we could
Mhm.
maybe even do on a podcast episode where it talks about like hypo and hypersensitivity and
Mm.
has probably 8 different like ways that you rate
Oh,
different. So I'll bring it in. Give me a little
cool.
SLP activity.
Love it. And one of the most recommended things to help with sensory processing disorder is occupational therapy. And we'll call Gabby up.
We should. And also, feeding into this thing that we've been talking about the whole time, there's like no access to adult occupational
Mm,
therapists,
yeah.
occupational therapy for adults. It is a
Unless you have
very,
hand problems. That's about the only thing.
yeah,
Or
or
you're
if you're
geriatric.
older.
Yep. If you're geriatric, we go back to teaching you how to put clothes on and stuff.
Yeah, it's really weird. I looked to work with an OT last year, and I just kept on getting sensory coaches.
Oh, interesting.
So it was like they were OTs, but weren't like actively using their license and charging me cash type of
Oh,
situation,
okay.
which I would have done, but there was like no clinics in the area
Mm,
that had an adult focused OT,
yeah,
which I think is really disheartening
yeah.
for
Hmm.
people that need that support.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you go to search for really any field searching for autism services, you pretty much only get pediatric, at least in their descriptions. I mean, like a lot of website descriptions just go straight to like, oh, autism, here's a picture of a child, and this is what we serve. Mm,
Yeah, I guess that's the same with speech now that I'm thinking about it. I feel
mm.
like, yeah, there's so much pediatric, there's so much geriatric, and in midlife, there's like specific things, but it's not like a general, you usually don't go for like various supports. But
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
not
like
common.
PT is very much across the lifestyle and in midlife too.
Yeah, I think for a lot of different things, but I don't think they're
Yeah.
really promote for neurodiversity related things.
No, I guess what I was saying is like I feel like
Who you
OTs
market
and
to.
SLPs mostly work with like babies or adult or like
Mm,
geriatric, and then PT is like way across. So
yeah, that's true.
yeah. I don't know.
Hmm,
Weird dude.
interesting.
Observations.
So that is part one to Other Things Under the Umbrella. Are you surprised about anything so far?
Yeah, I think I have dyslexia. Now I'm wondering if I'm not autistic and actually have sensory processing disorder.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding.
no.
I don't know. I think that what I think is most interesting is that there is so many overlaps and that there is a rhetoric that has continued throughout each one of like seen in childhood, how is it supported in adulthood, or like adults are expected to kind of push through those disabilities and
And well, and like a picture of like this is what we perceive as being the problems of this disorder, and then that's not it. Like our perception of like what the common experience is not like.
yeah, and
Mm,
I think it like continues on the rhetoric that we already know of like these are just differences, and the only reason why it's a disorder or classified as that is because it's like not functioning in our stereotypical
mhm.
neurotypical society. Like it is a comparison, but it's like that comparison is what makes it so hard to live with sometimes.
Yeah,
And if we maybe made more space for those types of learning or those types of taking in the world, maybe it wouldn't be as disabling for those folks
yeah.
to like live with those conditions.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
did you learn anything? That's what I learned.
I learned so much from researching this, so I'm
Yeah.
already like mind blown. But I loved a lot of the points that you brought up too. I love how much it fired you up.
That was surprising. I'm exhausted now.
Yeah. And we're only halfway through all of the conditions. So next week we're gonna start back into with fetal alcohol syndrome. So
Fascinating.
stay tuned. All right. Thanks, Hotties, for joining us for the start. Be unapologetically you this week.
Find your joy.
Thanks for joining us this week. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music.
Please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. We could use some of those. If you want to get pictures that go along with our episodes and follow along, join us on Instagram and TikTok.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Hotties.
Hotties. Um, I got an answer about me not feeding my dog.
Your automatic feeder.
I actually don't have the automatic feeder anymore since I moved in with Lauren and I'm there all the time. But she just texted me to ask if I had fed my dog.
You're like, baby.
No, oops. Okay.